community tennis organization in the country, and by tradition and choice, a year-round nonprofit organization for children and adults of Princeton and surrounding communities. And whereas the Princeton Tennis Program has served as a pioneer in developing the community tennis model that made tennis instruction and programming available to people of all ages, genders, nationalities, and backgrounds, and whereas its primary function is to promote health, character, good sportsmanship, and responsible citizenship by offering tennis programming of all kinds, including group and private tennis lessons, leagues, tournaments, summer camps, as well as special programs such as wheelchair tennis, school assemblies, and senior citizen classes. And whereas the Princeton Tennis Program is dedicated to pursuing a standard of excellence in teaching and education that encourages the development of health, character, good sportsmanship, and responsible citizenship. And whereas the Princeton Tennis Program has been recognized by the USTA regionally, statewide, and nationally for outstanding achievement. And whereas the Princeton Tennis Program and the Princeton Recreation Department have partnered for nearly 50 years to provide high-quality tennis opportunities for the Princeton community and have been committed to making tennis affordable for all who wish to learn and play the game by offering scholarships and other financial assistance to those who qualify. Now, therefore, I, Liz Lempert, Mayor of Princeton, County of Mercer, State of New Jersey, do hereby congratulate and applaud the Princeton Tennis Program for 60 years of outstanding service for providing outstanding recreational opportunities to the Princeton community. Thank you. And now it's time for public comment. And Linda, you signed up as the third person, but it sounds like you're up now.
On behalf of the previous two, I had hoped someone else would appear. I wanted, since I hadn't known that there would be a police report, I just wanted to quickly make a comment to Lieutenant Toole. Is that who's here? Ah, hello. I live on Lytle Street. I nearly ceased to exist living on Lytle Street today. People careen up Witherspoon, turn right onto Lytle. There is a sign that says children at play, which would not be visible to a responsible driver. It would mean they were driving distracted if they happened to look backward and see that sign after they had careened around the corner at probably 25 miles an hour. People generally don't tend to make a soft stop and then a careful turn. I happened to be crossing the street about 40 feet down the street. The young woman missed me by 3 feet. I jumped out of the way, and I'm usually pretty mindful of that happening, but there were children on that street. There is no speed limit posted. Furthermore, there are several times a day cars going the wrong way, entering Lytle Street from John Street, and I went down to take a really good look at the signage today. You've got a twisted Lytle Street sign with John Street. Butting up against it at the same height virtually is the one-way sign. I think people may not be seeing it, but that certainly needs to be addressed given the number of children on the street who are sometimes without parental supervision. The other thing is, and I'm not exactly being facetious about this, I almost suggest putting a stop sign at the wrong end of Lytle Street, because when they come speeding from John Street the wrong way down Lytle, they're not stopping. They're just right onto Witherspoon Street. Now, if you have a speeding patrol car in pursuit or responding to an emergency, a fire truck, anything it could be, people aren't mindful that it's a one-way street. They don't see a yield sign, they don't see a stop sign, so that means it's, no holds barred. Anyway, so if someone, and a speed limit needs to be posted, I would hope it would be 20, the same as Lytle Street, but I don't know who to speak with about such things.
We can certainly turn that over to the Traffic and Transportation Committee.
Okay.
And put it on their list of...
And also, at the beginning of the street on the right, where it says no parking from here to corner, it's virtually been erased. It's not visible to anyone. So it's a matter of chance that people don't park there, or perhaps they know the traffic laws. That needs to be replaced so that people actually know that. Okay, the main thing I wanted to bring up is, and I know it's next Monday that we have the neighborhood meeting with Avalon Bay and its representatives.
Well, we're going to have a neighborhood meeting about the construction that's going on there, and we felt it was important to get information out to the neighbors. At this point, I don't believe that Avalon Bay representatives will be there. We've extended the request to them to attend, but at this point it looks like it'll be the municipal staff. I will be there. Other members of council will be there to answer questions and to give out information. We'll be handing out phone numbers, and the engineering department has been compiling weekly reports. And so if people want to be on the list to get those, they can sign up at that meeting too. But it's an informational meeting for people who live in the neighborhood and other people in the area who are concerned.
And what if there are questions raised by any of the attendees that, for whatever reason, the council or various other officials are unable to answer? Only Avalon Bay would be able to answer. Would those be addressed at a further town council meeting, or?
Well, it depends what they are, but I mean, if we can't answer anything, we will try to get the answers and to distribute those as best we can.
And I finally still want to register my strong protest that the Guatemalan, I believe there are a couple of Ecuadorian and Honduran workers at this site. I want to register again a strong protest that they are being referred to as local workers. It is giving and it's been in every newspaper. It gives the impression that Avalon Bay is extending itself in some magnanimous way to employ local people. Well, if it's so proud of its record, why is it not disclosing what the nature of its employment practices are? And I intend to raise that with Avalon Bay itself or with their lawyer. Because for the second time in my own backyard, there's a guy who repairs bikes, and I'll shut up in a minute, and one of the workers had come to have his bicycle repaired there. This is 2 days ago. This is the man I've known 20 years and have worked in 2 restaurants with. I've helped his family. They know my reputation for translating free of charge, going above and beyond, and this is not bragging. It's just how I live. So they know what my record is. I have tried to prevent people from being deported or being in trouble with the law. For this young man to see me and run down the driveway, and I went after him and I shouted, "You don't understand. I'm not trying to lose anybody their jobs. I just want to make sure you're all protected. If there's a problem, you can feel safe in coming to me because I would never do anything to cause someone to lose their job. I don't want anything bad happening to any of you." Now, I am tracking down a lead. There were job applications put out at the Mexicana in Spanish by Avalon Bay, which is maybe how all of this started. I do not understand why Avalon Bay did not advertise in the local newspapers in English, number one, since there are also English-speaking unemployed in this area. Why, in particular, this group of people was solicited. And I don't want to go into my personal opinion about it, but having seen people sort of dumped in emergency rooms when there are accidents, and being forbidden to tell for whom they were working. It's been going on for the 32 years I've been translating for people, and by the most reputable employers in the town, I might add. Some of the fancier restaurants, a couple of businesses right up the street from where we are right now, fancy ones. So, end of statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. I saw a couple of, town cars out there today, and I just know these people, so I'm worried from another standpoint. I hope you can understand that, and I'm hoping, against hope, nothing goes wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mitty. And we all know who you are, Minnie, but if you could just state your name and address in the mic, because for the minutes, it's just easier if we have that all on the record.
Minnie Craig, Witherspoon Street, and I'd like to thank Lance for sending me the email about the meeting that the council is going to have with the neighborhood. So all I'm asking is if I could get some flyers printed up for my kids to pass out. I really wanted them passed out from Green down to Birch Avenue, and I'm sure other streets could take care of their spreading the words.
Typically, we do a mailing to everybody within a certain distance of the facility. And I don't know if that comes out of the engineering department or the clerk's office, but we could probably have some extra ones made for passing out as well.
But if there's a mailing that goes to the household, and
that's typically what just happens.
Yes.
There's also a Witherspoon
Mayor,
Jackson
I
meeting.
I have a copy here this evening. I can run a number of copies that you could take with you.
That'd be great. And it's going to go out through a mailing also, right? Or
We post it on the website, and we'll hand deliver it in the neighborhood. So anything that could be done to assist would be appreciated.
okay, great.
And also, we're planning to do the reverse 911.
Okay, perfect.
There is a Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood meeting on Saturday, so maybe if we could get some printed up, you could take them to the meeting
take
on
them there,
Saturday.
yeah. We had planned to distribute the flyers before Saturday, because the meeting is Monday. And I was really thinking about a bunch, because I'm talking about from Green Street to Birch Avenue, but now that I know it's going to be distributed other ways, everybody doesn't have a computer and see it on the website, but that would be a big help, because it's really a big job passing out these flyers to every door. The other thing is that I would really like for them to be in Spanish also, because our community, we have a lot of Latino families, neighbors. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I would say to both of you, too, if you could help us in sort of thinking before now and Monday, not just about getting the word out about that meeting, but going forward, how we can best communicate with the neighborhood. If it'd be great if we could announce at the meeting we're going to be posting the weekly notices in certain spots. I know there's, a couple bulletin boards around, and we can say we're going to do that, but if we could let people know ahead of time where to look, that would be helpful. So if there's spots that you think of that are places where traditionally people would go to look for information, we could certainly use those.
Okay, we'll make a list.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mayor, to that end, I think there are a couple of neighborhood distribution lists. Jenny, don't you have one from your old Moore Street? I mean, we can gather those electronic distribution lists.
Right. Yeah, the email is easier, I think, than for people who might not have email addresses or check it often. But those are all good. We'll try to communicate through all channels available. And is there any other public comment?
Roughly how long do you anticipate this meeting will run next Monday?
I'm going to repeat your question so that it gets mic'd. The question was, how long do we anticipate the meeting to run? I would say at least probably an hour, but more if there's questions. Mr. Kaiser, do you have an estimate on how long you think the meeting will go?
We'll be here as long as we need to be.
Okay, thanks. Yep. Mr. Simon?
Is that neighborhood meeting publicly noticed, or are we restricted to 3?
Yeah, it is because I'm going to be there, and there were 2 other council members who said they're planning to come, and I didn't want to lock the door for any other council members, so it's not going to be a council meeting, but we're going to notice it in case there's a quorum of council here. Are there any other comments? Okay, so now we are on to reports, and we'll start with the police report from Lieutenant Toole. And this setup is really bad because we can't see you, so I don't know if you can scoot around, so it's nice to be able to see you.
Sure.
Thanks.
I don't know if you really want what you asked for, now you have to see me, so. Good evening. I believe the report was distributed to you. It's also posted on the website. It's consistent with the previous month's reports. There is a small change to the format that I think Commissioner Howard can elaborate on. She was more involved with that than I was as far as the process.
Mayor, is that okay? I mean, just to explain to folks, you may have noticed that it looks different now. This new police report is, Chief Sutter has been working on the format. He's building off the Revelstone system, which is what is being used, I think, municipality-wide, and it has a number of advantages to it. One, I think it's apparently more efficient and productive for the staff because it draws the data right out from the system instead of having to pull it out and recreate a new chart. It is also electronic, so finally we'll be sharing things electronically, Jenny, not scanning in PDFs.
But not this one.
Yeah, not this one, though. I don't know whether this is a different issue, Linda, but supposedly, it's supposed to be electronic and easier to share. And most importantly, then, it's consistent with other benchmarking we're doing and would allow us to benchmark against other police departments that use a similar system. So some of the graphs seem a little bit off to me, the scale of the graphs. So we have a public safety committee tomorrow, and I was anticipating Patrick is joining us, that Patrick might have some insights. But like if you look at police service calls, it makes it look like from January to February they went way high, but that's because of the way the scale of the graph is. But the bottom line is this is a new format that we hope works, but want to get feedback from folks. The good news is Revelstone is updating their software, so there will be more functionality going forward and the graphs will improve. But would love to get folks feedback and hope this works, but it's a work in progress.
Can I ask a question about it? Or
Yes, please.
It's great that we're improving things, and thank you for working on it. The one thing that seemed less, it was harder to understand the data because the years weren't right next to each other. And that was, I was looking at the old one and it had, the previous year, each individual item you could see right next to it instead of having to look onto another table. For especially the UCR data.
So let us take that back. We're meeting with Nick tomorrow. I don't know if you, Lieutenant, if you don't have any particular insights there.
And then it had like 13, 14, and Y to D, or sometimes it had the previous 2 years and then year to date or something.
We recognize that on some of the things it was not ideal, but Revelstone is updating, and it seems like the potential is so good, especially for the benchmarking. But I'll take back that particular issue with this basically year-over-year comparisons. And then folks like the way that they did just this new update at the front, and they do know that it's pie, not the kind you eat.
Yes.
We talked about that, but I think pie is very popular downstairs.
And then as we go forward, if people have suggestions for formatting, I'm going to volunteer Councilwoman Howard for people to forward those to her. Ms. Butler?
Thank you. I want to second Jenny's comment because I think it is important. Ultimately, one of the things we have to determine is the level of staffing of the police force, and to do that, we really need to get a sense of trending where the numbers are going more than, the absolute numbers, whether we've got the right number of officers and people on the ground. I think we talked about this before, but now that with the change format, there seem to be some new categories, and we don't have to talk about, you don't have to explain them tonight, but we ask for a description of what some of these things are. So we have theft by deception, threat, improper influence offenses. So, some of those just aren't very clear what that means and what we're looking at. Another thing was, in the former borough, we got a description of what was going on Prospect Avenue, and that's another area that I think is really important. And when I was thinking about that today, actually, Lance, I was wondering whether the police force has met with the eating club presidents. I know a couple of years ago we did that in the borough and took Gary de Blasio, and there was a good conversation about that, but it is something that probably needs to happen every year.
Yep, we have a meeting in September. So
way to go.
Yep.
With the new class. Perfect. And then finally, not having to do with anything on this chart in particular, but having to do with the report that came out in early May from the federal government about sexual assaults on campus, and in fact, Princeton being listed as one of the schools that is under investigation having to do with a situation in 2010. I'm just wondering whether or not there's been any conversation between the police force and the university regarding the handling of sexual assaults, whether you want to revisit the MOU, the various categories within the MOU.
Right. We, just as a matter of information, we meet with public safety monthly, both departments, to share information, share problems, concerns as we're working through this MOU, because we still have some glitches we come across, so we try and straighten them out as we come along. Our next meeting, as a matter of fact, is tomorrow. So this report that you mentioned about the Clery Act and things, that came out after the last time we met, so we haven't had a chance to discuss that with them. But we meet with them monthly, but we also, when things come up, we pick up the phone, we call each other all the time, so there's no communication gap, but we'll discuss it tomorrow and see what we can find out.
Thank you. I do hope that is on the agenda, though. So
Let me just add, though, that I know that Chief Sutter has been talking to the county prosecutor's office about it as well, because those cases obviously go through. Ultimately, they're the ones who are prosecuting, so I know he's been in touch with them, and we're planning to get an update tomorrow at Public Safety Committee about that.
Are there any other comments or questions about the report? Mr. Miller?
Yes. I don't understand the chart on page 33. It's a bar chart, officer availability for March, and there are two bars that show available. They have different numbers associated with them. Can you explain that?
I noticed that myself. I don't know what the explanation is itself. I can guess what it is. It was just mislabeled. I believe the available listed at the bottom is our total on paper staffing, and then you have above that is long-term sick. So there's about 4 officers out long-term sick right now, and then the top available is the actual number of people that are actually coming in working day to day.
Okay.
So I think it's just mislabeled. It's really the bottom one should be staffing, total staffing, sworn officers.
Thank you.
Ms. Crumler?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for arranging the ride-along program, and I'm excited to be scheduled for my first ride-along. I believe some people already had theirs.
Yeah, Ms. Howard and I went out last week, and it was great. I mean, it was really informative to see the day-to-day and to see how the computer system works in the cars. I was there to see an arrest, and I was really impressed with how our police officer treated the suspect and just the professionalism of the whole organization. I knew it was there, but to see it in detail was a great experience. So I encourage all the rest of my colleagues to do it too.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I believe the department's also going to be working to expand the program too eventually and open it up to members of the public as well. But I think we're the guinea pigs to make sure all the kinks get worked out of it. But it was great.
Yeah, that's the plan. Thank you.
Did you have a comment? Yeah, Mr.
Yes. Well, my first question is, Officer Toole, did you have anything in the report you wanted to call out for us before we keep asking questions?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what
Is there anything in particular you wanted to call out for us or present to us before we keep asking questions? I had a few, but
Right.
if you wanted to, if you had anything you wanted to discuss first, I would.
Well, the only thing I noticed as far as the statistic for March, when I looked at it, it might be a little alarming if you look at our sexual assaults tripled, but there's, not that it's a good thing, but if you look into it, it's not as bad as it first appears. One of the three was an event that happened 3 years ago, and the victim just came forward and reported it. So it's not a current, and these are all unrelated events, so there's nothing as far as a serial opportunity out there. So the first one was 3 years ago. The suspect was identified, was arrested, and charged, so that's been cleared. The second one involved a juvenile that's still under investigation. We actually know who the person is, but we have not been able to locate that person. So once we locate him, then we'll pursue the charges as necessary. And then the third one is a Princeton resident who was assaulted in another jurisdiction, actually in another county. She came to report it here because she felt more comfortable coming here, so we took the initial investigation, and then we forwarded it over to that county for them to follow up with the investigation. So the incident didn't even happen in Princeton, but because they come to us, obviously we want to take that report and process it and move it on down the line to get it handled appropriately. So the numbers are a little deceiving, but I just want to make sure that's the only thing that really, I think, could be alarming by looking at that at first glance.
All right, so I did have a few questions then beyond those. The first is, I noticed that both burglary and assaults have been somewhat higher in the first few months this year, in at least one of the months, than they were over the past year to 15 months. Is there any explanation for that, or is that sort of within sort of normal variation?
But we have had a little bit of a rise, unfortunately, in residential burglaries in the last couple months. Several different crews are out there operating. We've arrested some we have ideas who they are, but not enough to charge, and others are unresolved. As far as the assaults, I have no data to correlate why the difference is there.
I also noticed that the overtime seems to be trending high this year. So is there, in earlier months, the explanation was the severe winter, but that doesn't really seem like it should apply for March, unless I'm misremembering. So is there an explanation for March, and do we expect it to sort of trend more toward the average from last year, and if not, are we okay on the budget, would be another question for the finance people.
Right. The overtime, as to answer Mr. Miller's question earlier, is we have we had 5 officers out long-term sick. So we just got one back this week. So we still have 4 that are out. So that is causing a drain on our manpower with training. Springtime, we have springtime qualifications, a bunch of different schooling going on. So our minimums are being affected. So our minimum staffing, somebody calls out sick, we have to call somebody in, and it affects the overtime. So that almost all of our squads are below our ideal staffing level right now. So that's unfortunately jumping up the overtime. Hopefully when those people come back, it'll drop the overtime rate back down.
Okay, and my last question is, in terms of helping us understand how the force is doing, one of the metrics that had been discussed as a potential metric was response time, and we haven't had that, any kind of measure of response times in our reports. Is that something that you're potentially working on with your current software to be able to report that?
I know we identify there's a problem with the software. I'm not sure whether the answers come up, whether we can fix that with this current software. So I don't really have the answer for it, but that is the problem, is the software.
But I've marked it, Patrick, so we can, as one thing to get back on.
Is it the Revelstone software or the software we purchased?
The dispatch software.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think also, I was going to note that burglaries have been up in all the surrounding towns also. It's weird, but it goes like in a circle. Lawrenceville, Ewing, I think Montgomery. I mean, it's,
right.
I don't know, I guess they just pick a certain area and just concentrate on that area until they get caught, or and then they move on to the next 5 or 6 towns.
They don't have the same problems we have with crossing jurisdictional boundaries and respecting one another's, so...
No, I don't think they care about the boundary where Princeton starts and Lawrence stops, or whatever.
It's pretty much a crime of opportunity. They're cruising around, they don't care for their Princeton, Montgomery, Lawrence, or where they're at. They see what they want, and then that's where they go. So there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Okay, thank you. Now we have our council reports. So I'm going to start with Ms. Howard.
Thanks. I'll just add, and thank you, Lieutenant Toole, that that the ride-along was really impressive. It was really interesting to hear about the computer system, to get a feel for the morale issues, and for me, what was interesting was really seeing the emphasis on moving violations, and the emphasis downtown on those, which I know are a great concern, and we hear a lot about those. So it was really good. So I encourage my colleagues to sign up to do that. A quick update just from the Board of Health that we had a terrific meeting in the last week, and what was great was that I want to thank Bob Kaiser for coming and bringing Jack West, and they were very generous with their time and explained to the Board of Health what's going on at the old hospital site, and addressed questions about how our municipal operation operates and coordinates with the Department of Health, and our new health officer has been on site several times, checking masks and fit testing, and we seem to have a really nice collaboration between the engineering office and the Board of Health and the health officer. And I think it answered a lot of questions that the Board of Health had about what role they should have, given concerns about the impact of the development on public health. And we had several members of the public in attendance also, including Linda here, Linda Auerbach, who's in the audience now, asking questions. And so it was a very good discussion. And so, Bob, I want to thank you for being so willing with your time, and it was a great example of the departments working together in a way that they probably had not done in the past, and so I was very impressed. Thank you.
Ms. Grummeler?
Yeah, I have a couple things. First of all, we finally got the recycling cans on Nassau Street, so that's really exciting. And I also wanted to tell residents that the convenience center, some people don't even know that we have this convenience center out on River Road where you can go and drop unwanted items off. It's a relic of the township days, and when you could buy a dump ticket and go out there. And so some people still do that. They buy the dump tickets and dump things, even though in theory you can put everything out on your curb and it'll get picked up. But the convenience center is now going to offer a computer drop-off and television drop-off and also textile drop-off. So if you have those things, you can go there and drop those things off. And what the textile I'm particularly excited about, I'd like to get a textile drop-off location closer to town, but even so, you can drop off not just clothes, but rags and towels and sheets and clothes that nobody would want, because there's actually a market for textiles. I don't know, they make it into fluff that's used, and so it's a way to keep those things out of the landfill and they can be recycled. I mean, so that convenience center is only open. It's open on Mondays, certain days, and there's a schedule online for when it's open. It's open on specific Saturdays and specific Mondays, but it's worth figuring it out if you have some stuff to get rid of. There was one more thing. Oh, and the Shade Tree Commission met, and I just wanted to warn you, and we're going to be talking about this more, that there's a pest that has been slowly working its way toward us. It's called the emerald ash borer, and it's a really horrible attacker of ash tree and killer of ash trees. And it poses a big threat to our tree forest, and we're going to have to deal with it. So we just started talking about it at the Shade Tree Commission, and I had to leave to come to this meeting, but I'm just saying keep your ears out we're probably going to have to spend some money on preventive measures and cutting down ash trees, and it's really sad. It was just yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, it was spotted in Somerset, so that's pretty close. And then I wanted to say that the IT steering committee met. So it was a really productive meeting, and we're going to be meeting every 2 weeks for a while, and then we're going to probably meet every month.
I have,
Patrick, did you have a question?
I had already mentioned this to Bob, but I want to nudge the IT steering committee to try to find a way to allow remote participation at these meetings for those of us who may have to travel.
Okay.
At council meetings, you're talking about, not at the meetings of the IT committee. Okay, yeah, excellent.
I have 3 reports. The first one I had at our last council meeting. Those of you that were here recall that a resident by the name of Henry Singer asked me a series of detailed questions about our agreement with Princeton University and how we arrived at the agreement. I asked him to send me the questions, and I would then respond in writing to them. Henry, if you're out there tonight, please be advised that when you sent them to me, you sent them with a no reply email address, so that I cannot send you an answer to the questions in writing unless I have an email address, or perhaps look you up in the phone book and find your address in town. But I do have the answers for you, and if you'll send me your email address, I'll send them to you, and if not, we'll send them to you by writing. Secondly, there is an issue that I've been working on with the university and the Regional Chamber of Commerce that involves the fact that Princeton has become a destination for tours that are sold to Asian and European tourists. The tours seem to originate in New York City, stop briefly in Princeton, and then go on to Philadelphia. And as best we can tell, the stop in Princeton is billed as a visit to the campus of a major U.S. university and an opportunity for a coffee and toilet break. The problem is that while the tourists get some coffee, fast food, and use the facilities of the coffee and fast food shops on Nassau Street, the buses idle while parked. The problem as far as the university is concerned is that the tourists often cross onto the front of the campus in front of Nassau Hall and wander in and out of the buildings and offices, often looking for restrooms. The university has stationed Mandarin speakers in Nassau Hall to assist the tourists and keep them from entering into the administrative offices. From the standpoint of the municipality, the present tour arrangement really adds very little of value to the municipality. The tourists may buy some coffee, fast food, and T-shirts, but don't stay long enough to do serious shopping and don't stay overnight. The problem was brought to light by the fact that during the week of June 16th to June 20th of this year, Princeton University will be a host site for the Special Olympics 2014 U.S. Games. Track and field and swimming competitions will be held on the campus. As a result, it's anticipated there will be larger than usual tourist and bus traffic in the CBD during that week. Working with the Regional Chamber of Commerce and the university, we're advising the private tour operators and bus companies that there will be more limited stop and park options on Nassau Street during the week of the Special Olympics due to the influx of guests coming for the Special Olympics. The Chamber, the university, and our police department recognize that what we are doing for the Special Olympics is really not a solution to the problem. And as a longer-term solution, we're looking at the possibility of directing the tour bus operators to park their buses at a location away from the central business district. From a longer-term standpoint, tourism may represent an opportunity for economic development for the municipality, especially if the tourist visits can be tied in with visits to Princeton historic sites or cultural events in the town and for an overnight stay. It's clear that we're a destination for overseas visitors. In their present form, the tourists really bring little or no benefit to the town, and it might be worth working with the Chamber and the university to explore the possibility of using tourism as an economic opportunity for the municipality. Final report is on discussions that Ms. Krummiller and I have had with a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Sprague, who is the executive director of an organization called Sustainable Energy Funding Program. Mr. Sprague visited Princeton several months ago in connection with the Save the Valley Road School organization and had discussions with them about finding funding sources for saving the schools. He reached out to Jenny and myself and asked for a meeting. The purpose of the meeting was, from our standpoint, was to get a better understanding of what SEFP offered in terms of resources for the possible rehab of the old VRS building for community use. We pointed out that the title of the old building was held by Princeton Public Schools, and the municipality was interested in understanding if the building could be rehabilitated and used for community or municipal purposes in a financially sustainable way. Mr. Sprague said he might be able to provide the resources for an independent study of the structural integrity of the building to determine the estimated cost of bringing the building up to code. He subsequently asked, through Jenny and myself, that the municipality obtain approval from the schools for an engineering firm that they would hire, SCFP would hire, to enter the building and assess the estimated cost of rehabilitation. Jenny and I told Mr. Sprague that before taking the step of asking the schools to permit this contractor to enter the building, that we would have to do due diligence on his organization and that approval of the council to proceed would be needed. We specifically asked for information on other projects that his organization had engaged in, for financials on the organization, and for information on the principals. The requested information was not forthcoming, and we advised Mr. Sprague that the municipality would not ask the schools for permission for an engineering firm to be hired by Mr. Sprague's organization to enter the building for the purpose of providing an estimate of the cost of rehabbing the building. Mr. Sprague responded that he needs to discuss our request for information with his attorney and his board and would get back to us in early June. And at this point, any further discussions that we might have with him are on hold until we receive the requested information and have an opportunity to do due diligence on his organization.
Thank you. Mr. Lieberman?
Yeah, Councilman Miller is on target. On Saturday, when I was jogging on Nassau Street, there were 3 buses. And it's funny because I was counting the number of people getting off the buses as I sat there and tried to catch my breath. I'm not as young as I used to be when I go running here. So, it was about 160-something people, and this was at 9 in the morning. And I said, "Oh my gracious!" And I'm just wondering all the times the buses parked there and people unload. I think you're right. I think that there is an economic boom there for a lot of the merchants in town. But also, what I noticed was that the bus was actually blocking the crosswalk, and I had to walk around the bus. And I'm like, oh my God, I could have gotten hit. So I do think that we have to be very, very mindful of what's going on, because I think it's just going to get worse and not better. Princeton is a spot that a lot of people love to come to and visit. Briefly, the Corner House, everybody's invited on May 29th for our Leadership Award ceremonies at 6 o'clock. And we give the Marion Levine Award to a youngster, a young adult that will be leaving and then going to college and so forth. Also, the Community Day, I met with the wrap-up committee, and we discussed some of the issues that were mentioned at our last meeting. And it was a great meeting. They invited the clergy in town, along with the merchants, and all the entities that were involved in Community, so that we can all put our heads together and see, when is the best time for Community, and what is the damage that it does to everyone involved at whatever time that we have it. So we don't have the date or Saturday or Sunday at this time, but we do have open communication, and we do have all the cards on the table from all the different parties, and we should have a date very soon. And I think that's about it.
A question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you discuss making the event shorter? So you could start the Community would be starting even later, so that the John Witherspoon neighborhood church parking would be less affected?
Yeah, there was, believe it or not, there were a ton of things discussed, and that, time was discussed, having parking location at a different spot and then shuttle people in, that was discussed. We discussed all that was discussed. Everything was on the table, and I just want to say the merchants and the clergy, everyone was on board that no one wanted to hurt the other one. We didn't want to hurt the merchants' business, and the merchants didn't want to hurt the clergy's, the congregations and so forth. So it was a very nice discussion.
And did you talk about possibly having, raising the fees? It seems like if it's so popular, is there any way that the town could maybe generate some revenue from it, or at least recoup our costs for our staff on that day?
Well, we did find out that on Sunday, believe it or not, it cost the university 40% more to have it on Sunday, because the money, community university is paid for by the students at the university. I guess they have a line item that the students, and that's where the money comes from for community university, from the university. So it's 40% more than it would if it was on a Saturday, that we found out that it cost the university students. So they are a little, not upset, but that's something that we have to keep in mind also.
Well, it seems like there should be some way. There's 30,000 people with money in their pockets that come to our downtown.
Well, I agree. We discussed the whole realm. We've discussed, when does it get too large? When is it too many people? There's only so many people that can fit in Princeton at any given time. If it goes to 60,000 people, what do you do? So everything was discussed, and we'll have a report and we'll bring back to you, but just let you know that it is something that we are working on.
Thank you. Ms. Butler?
Yes, so Community Park Pool opened this weekend, and that went, right.
I'm sorry.
So Saturday wasn't such a great day weather-wise, but there were 2,000 plus visitors on Memorial Day and over 4,000 for the 3-day weekend, which is a really good turnout. The park will be open this weekend, May 31st and June 1st, and next weekend, June 7th and 8th. The 7-day-a-week schedule begins June 11th. So the weekend hours are 11 to 8, and weekday hours are 12 to 8 p.m. The rec department will be open on Saturday and Sunday this weekend and next from 10:30 to 6 for registration, for pool photo IDs, and all other program membership inquiries. And you can also call the rec department for more information. To date, we have 3,938 members, which is up from last year when we had 3,544 at this date in 2013. It's really important because not only does the rec department have a financial obligation toward the payment of the pool, but that their funds also go to support other programming around town, other recreation. Peter O'Neill stepped down as the chair of the Recreation Fund, and he's been replaced by Karen Giserni as the new chair. Financial aid applications, to date, we've had 70 applications that have been processed since, as of 5/23. So that's also good news. That means 70 families we've helped at the pool, have access to the pool. I feel a little bad that I thought maybe PTP was going to say something. Ben might say something on behalf of PTP, but if I could just double back and say that has just been a really great relationship for the rec department. They have made improvements to the tennis courts that would have otherwise fallen to the municipality. They run a great program. I participate in it every summer, and I can't say enough about it. It's really been a win-win, and I kind of thought people were going to say more about it, but it's great, and I think that's it. Just one thing to Bob Kaiser, and also to Sergeant Murray. I've had a request to do some striping in the parking lot for pedestrian safety out here, and it is, particularly with summer coming upon us, if anybody has any feedback, I think we can get that on the traffic and transportation agenda, but anybody who has anything to say about that before we huddle, I'd appreciate hearing.
You mean in the parking lot, like getting from your car to the building?
Well, yes, because this side door opens out and you have to cross into the parking lot, but, it feels like you would put a crosswalk down, but there's no end. There's nothing. Right, but cars do pull in rather rapidly toward the, heading back in the direction of rec. I'm sure they are not rec employees or people who are using the recreation department, but people are just pulling back there quickly. So it does feel like people leaving this building are a little bit at risk, and I don't know what we can do to help them out, but I've had that request.
Thank you. Mr. Simon?
Thank you. We'll put that matter on the TNT subcommittee agenda.
Great. Lance thinks we ought to put speed bumps out there. I'm just telling you, Sergeant Murray. Come on.
I'm just kidding. It was a joke. I know. Thank you.
I think we should put those stanchions, yield to pedestrians.
Mr. Simon?
All right, I have just a few brief reports today. The Alexander Street University Place Traffic and Transit Task Force met. We did get an update. We were not able to meet the deadline to apply for the planning grant, the Tiger grant. There simply wasn't quite enough time and not insufficient commitment of funding from various sources to be able to put that together in time. The task force is working on a report to council, possibly late June, to be determined. Our chairperson will communicate with the mayor on that. The Finance Committee has met, and just so people know what we're working on, we are working on the newsletter, working on long-term capital planning, and sort of the other side of the equation on capital planning. What we've talked about so far has been sort of financial metrics, but the thing that has been missing is sort of a needs assessment in terms of what's actually adequate capital planning, adequate capital for our infrastructure needs. We're working to pull together an estimate for the savings from consolidation for this year and how we're comparing versus the Commission and Transition Task Force projections. And we're working on simply a review of the 2014 budget process and how it might be improved for next year. So that was on the Finance Committee. The last thing is, Mayor, you and I both attended this lunch from the merchants. Do you want to speak to that, or would you prefer that I just kind of raise? Okay, so last week the mayor and I met with a group of Princeton merchants. I don't know if this group has a name, but it's a group that has met occasionally. Raised a number of issues of concern to the business community, including parking for customers and employee, public transit and wayfinding, garbage pickup and cleanup through the Central Business District, Wi-Fi throughout the Central Business District, capital improvements, some questions about density and zoning, and the questions about traffic as well. So the goal was not just to raise questions, but to sort of figure out what to do about them. I would say that there wasn't clear consensus at the end on exactly how to proceed, but that's certainly something that we can expect further discussion on, I would expect.
Yeah, and I think some of those issues could be discussed too at the Municipal Economic Development Task Force group too.
I think it very much dovetails into exactly what the mission of that group. That was my last report.
Great, thank you. I have a few reports. The first one we've already talked about, which is next Monday, June 2nd. There's going to be a neighborhood meeting for Avalon Bay here in this room starting at 7 p.m. The next day, I think we all know, is the election on Tuesday, June 3rd. Polls are open from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. And just a reminder to everybody that we've done this for at least a couple years now, but some people's polling locations are different now than they were pre-consolidation. And if you have any confusion, you can go to the website and type in your address, and it'll tell you where you should go to vote. And then the next evening, on Wednesday, June 4th, there's going to be a meeting about the proposed pipeline that Williams wants to put in, and this is a meeting that's being held by the Princeton Ridge Coalition, and it'll be in the other building in Monument Hall, the former Borough building. And that's also going to start at 7 p.m. I'll be in attendance. Bob Kaiser will be there, and it's an opportunity for the group to talk about the latest submissions by Williams for their plans. And so there's an existing pipeline there that Williams wants to build a second pipeline alongside it. There's still safety concerns about the construction. And Williams has been pretty open about meeting with the municipality, meeting with the neighbors, but there's still some serious safety concerns. The pipeline runs by Stewart Day School and also by Princeton Day School. So if anybody's interested, that'll be on Wednesday at 7. And I want to thank people for a couple events we just had. One was the bike rodeo. It was a really great event. I want to thank the police, Human Services, the Pedestrian and Bike Advisory Committee. I feel like this it wasn't even twice as good as last year. It was like beyond, so much better than it's been in the past. It was a great day, and all the kids there were really happy, and I think they learned a lot. I saw a lot of kids with new helmets. It was a really great event. So thank you for everybody who had a part in making that happen. And I also want to thank Spirit of Princeton for the Memorial Day parade many of us participated in on Saturday. It was a really great parade as always, and the ceremony afterwards I thought was especially moving. They had a really great speaker this year, so thank you to the Spirit of Princeton. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Commissioner Jim Simpson of the State Department of Transportation has announced that he's going to be leaving very soon on June 6th. And Commissioner has been living in Princeton while he's been working at DOT, and he's been a huge friend to Princeton. We've been really lucky. He's been extremely responsive. And he's done a really great job, and we're certainly going to miss him. We wish him well, and we hope that he stays in Princeton even after June 6th. And that was the end of my reports. Ms. Butler?
If I could just piggyback on the bike rodeo, one thing I thought was really so terrific was that they gave away so many helmets, and they really went to kids who might not have otherwise had helmets. It was really important, and kids also got right-sized. So you're right. I just want to add my compliments to the police. It was a great event, and everyone else who participated.
Yeah, it was great. Although you have to be very hardy to have a hot dog at 10 a.m. So I think we should make a list of who does that. They get a special prize, or I don't know. Are there any staff reports? No? Mr. Kaiser?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple items to report on. One relates to the hospital site, and staff has been continuing to monitor the work at the buildings. Unuzi Corporation is continuing to remove items from inside of the building, and these are items that are recycled, such as electrical wiring, copper piping, ceiling tiles, carpeting, and those sort of items. And they anticipate that work continuing for another 2 weeks until that's completed. In addition, they've started on the asbestos removal work, and the asbestos is being removed from section by section. They're following proper protocol and safety procedures in removing the asbestos. They're storing it in a contained area inside the building, and then from there it's taken to a unit, a container outside that is actually sealed and removed from the site. And so far, they've removed one of those containers from the site, and they anticipate that work continuing for the next 2 months with removing the asbestos. In addition, with the underground fuel tanks, there's a total of 6 tanks. The first 4 tanks being 2 3,000-gallon number 6 fuel oil tanks, a 1,000-gallon gasoline tank, and a 4,000 number 2 fuel oil tank. They were removed uneventful. There was no leakage or any type of discharge found with removal of those tanks. 2 other tanks were previously abandoned, it's believed back in the mid-'60s, and those are 2 6,000-gallon tanks that are located between the hospital and the parking garage. And they had stored number 6 fuel for heating, and it was determined that there was a discharge associated with at least one of the tanks. DEP was notified of the discharge. There's a case number. The soil is being sampled, and appropriate action will be taken following up with that apparent discharge. Dr. Whitman was on site today with myself and Jack West and others, and he will be monitoring what's occurring. The action being taken is the responsibility of the LSRP, which is Ecol Sciences LSRP, and they've pledged to keep us totally informed regarding this matter. Dr. Whitman had said regarding the number 6 fuel oil, he said the good news with that is the material is sort of like molasses, so it doesn't move a large distance if it discharges into the soil. But we'll certainly be looking for those tests to be coming on back, as well as at least one monitoring well, so that we can fully check any impacts that may have occurred due to that leak. Later this afternoon, they were working on removing the second fuel oil tank. They anticipate that work being completed, the removal of the 2 tanks, by the end of the week, and then they will get the soil sample information back and take appropriate action relative to the disposal of that soil. And we'll continue to go ahead and monitor the site, and we've had representatives from the building department, of course the engineering department, and the health department, as well as Dr. Whitman, either himself or his representative, monitoring the site.
And I should add to that, I should have put in my report, I toured the site with John Petnati last week as well. And I know there's been a lot of municipal staff monitoring the situation, and just from a layperson's perspective, I was really impressed with every single item there is being stacked for reuse. So the ceiling tiles are all packed and sealed, all the wiring, the plastic's being taken off the wiring, and that's being reused. And so every little thing they're taking down is being sorted and ready to be shipped off, and the site seems very organized, and they were used to seeing municipal officials there too, which was good to see. So I want to thank the staff. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work. Yep, Ms. Butler.
So I forwarded to Mr. Kaiser some emails that I've received, but just to be clear, there's no hazardous waste being thrown into the open container, the big, sorry, Lance, into the big open container.
Absolutely not. There's lots and lots of eyes watching the entire operation, and that's not occurring. I've been very impressed with the manner in which they're conducting their activities. They're keeping everything separated, and they've taken all proper safety precautions relating to the removal of the asbestos. Dr. Whitman toured that operation today as well, and had indicated that they were doing everything as they should be.
And can I ask a question about the abandoned tank? If you thought it was abandoned in the 60s, the one they pulled out that it possibly had some leakage?
Correct. When they pulled it out, this was a tank that was opened up and was filled up with sand, so they have to take it out in pieces. But when they pulled it out, they had detected some odor in the soil and checked it further and felt that the soil should be tested due to the odor that they had detected on the sides of the tank.
You answered, I think, what was my question, that it had been filled with sand even back in the 60s. That was the proper way that they would have abandoned that tank.
That's correct.
Okay, and so this must have leaked prior to the 60s? I mean,
It must have leaked prior to the tank being abandoned, because there wasn't any product in the tank when they removed the sand.
Okay, thank you. I have a separate question for staff not having to do with Avalon Bay.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us what's going on at the shopping center with the flooding? Do you know anything about that?
I'm not aware of anything with the flooding at the
Anybody
shopping
hear any?
center.
Kathy, you didn't hear anything?
No, I've heard. It's strange. I was actually getting my teeth cleaned, and the water pressure just totally dropped. And they found out that in the middle of the shopping center on the green, the water pipe had actually broken, and it shot the water straight up in the air, which caused a lot of mud to shoot on against the sidewalk. And there were contractors there fixing the items as of this afternoon. They had to bring in a backhoe and dig up the dirt, no 9 yards. But it was a water main break right in the middle of the shopping center.
Having nothing to do.
Yep, having nothing to do with us, and my teeth still came out very well.
All right, excellent. Are there any other reports or questions? No? Okay. With council's permission, I'd like to change the order of the agenda and bump up the second ordinance introduction, because I know there's a couple members of the public who come to speak about the second ordinance introduction. So, the second, it's the very top of the second page. So this was concerning the acquisition of 59 Meadowbrook. And I'm going to recuse myself on this item because of the proximity to my own house, and I'm going to hand the meeting over to Mr. Miller.
And I will read the ordinance by title. An ordinance authorizing Princeton to acquire Block 5701, Lot 16, Princeton tax map for the sum of $625,000, utilizing funds from the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management FEMA grant program. Project number RFC-PJ-02-NJ-2011-01, and from the Municipal Open Space Trust Fund. And I'll now open the meeting for public comment.
We call it the Flood House because it floods.
You have to identify yourself.
What do I have to do?
No, your name.
Oh, my name is Victoria Bell. Okay. My name's Victoria Bell, and we're a family that lives on Meadowbrook, where we call it the Flood House because it always floods. And so we know it's a rental property, and we see people devastated because it's a one-level building. And so when it gets flooded, it's actually in the river, and it's completely flooded, and so the people's belongings are... And so we on the block feel bad that this keeps happening also, I think. So many people have had to turn to FEMA to, pull their lives back together. And we've been, we don't know how to quite stop that anyway. So I'm just coming to just definitely confirm it floods a lot, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, and that several families have been devastated with all their belongings and their small children. I don't know if you want to ask me more questions about it, but it is the Flood House, and it 100% floods. So I don't even know how it's possible to rent it, but they do continue to rent it. So it just needs to be stopped, I think, for that reason alone.
Well, thank you for telling us. It's always good to have firsthand knowledge of this, and I think we're making the right decision.
But just
Patrick?
Yeah, just to be clear, the purpose of the ordinance is for the municipality to acquire the property to end the practice of renting it, yes.
Exactly, and so I'm just very much supporting that to make clear that these families have been devastated. It's very sad.
Thank you.
And as a community, we weren't sure how to stop it because it was something that was happening. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, to provide a little bit of background, our engineer managed to get a grant from the U.S. Government, FEMA, to cover almost all of the purchase price. We have a small amount that we're covering from the Open Space Fund. And so we really want to thank Mr. Kaiser for his efforts to make this happen. Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the history of how it is we came to be buying this house?
Yes, as was indicated by the speaker, the property has flooded numerous times, and as a result, we were able to file an application through the repetitive loss program. And back when we filed the application, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, at that time, FEMA had paid out, I believe it was close to $200,000 in losses over a period of time. So they take a look at what they pay out, and they rank that against other properties, and this particular property ranked fairly high because of the numerous payouts that have occurred. And as has been indicated, when the property is flooded, it was a rental property, and the tenant's life was totally disrupted when that occurred. And this particular property was built in a floodplain. With current regulations, there's no way that it could have been constructed in that location today, but it was constructed back in the 60s, and at that time, the regulations weren't in place that are safeguard those land use developments today.
And the intention is to remove the house and have the property fallow?
Yes, the property will become a municipal property, and we'll remove the house, we'll topsoil and seed the area, and it will be an open space area for the neighborhood to use.
And removing the house will not stop any potential flooding at that site, but it will stop renters from being abused by renting a house that is prone for flooding. And the history of the flooding there goes back a long, long way, back to the 1950s when that area was developed. And as Mr. Kaiser pointed out, you could not build that house where it is today because the flood zone maps did not exist when that house was built. It's been a long negotiation. I want to compliment our municipal attorney, who's not here tonight, who really brought this to closure with the owners of the property. And our grant covers most of the cost of acquiring the property and the cost of removing the house from the property.
Do you need a motion?
Questions or comments from...
No, I think there may be someone else that would like to speak.
You need to come to the microphone.
Take the microphone, please.
I'm Barbara Winitsky. My house backs to the flood house. I'm on 160 Leabrook Lane. And I've been in my house 20 years, and it was well, first of all, the house was acquired in a situation where it was a flood sale and should never have, even at that time, been sold. And this is I'm so happy to see this happening because this is so long overdue. But my understanding, and I'm wondering if you can shed light on it, is that back in the early 60s or whenever it was built, that they actually diverted the creek in order to build the house, that the creek flowed in the front of where the house is. And I never knew if that was true or not, but the creek always finds its path. So it would always run through the house back onto the street. I'm just really glad to see this happen. I couldn't even bake cookies for people anywhere when they moved in because I felt like I was being dishonest. Like, you didn't want to tell them. But thank you.
I'm happy to move
Second.
adoption of the ordinance.
Any questions or comments from council?
It's been a long time coming, and I just want to thank everybody involved.
And can we introduce the ordinance by a voice vote or roll call? Okay. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
There'll be a public hearing on the ordinance on June 23rd. We'll wait for a moment for the mayor to come back in.
Mayor, I just want to say we decided to buy your house while you're gone, and we'll tear that down, and we'll let you move across the street.
And you might be
Thank you.
interested in the fact that one of the speakers from the public suggested that stream might have been diverted when the house was built, and that the stream originally flowed down what is now the middle of the road.
Huh. It likes to do that when it's raining hard. So the stream has a memory, I guess. Okay, so let's go back then to resolutions. And the first resolution is 14-163, a bid award, improvements to Mercer Road, Top Line Construction Corporation for $561,136.05.
I'll move. Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Ms. Butler. Are there any comments or questions, discussion? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 14-164, Shared Services Agreement between County of Mercer and Princeton for fire dispatch services.
I'll move the resolution.
Second it?
It's moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes unanimously. The next is Resolution 14-165, Summit Collaborative Advisors LLC, expanded executive search not to exceed $14,000. And I have just an explanation of this one. As everybody on council knows, I just want to make sure that the public knows as well. Our intrepid administrator, Bob Brashai, who's actually not here with us tonight, has told us that he's going to be stepping down at the end of this year. And one of council's most important goals for 2014 is to hire his replacement. And we've are in the midst of the first piece of that process, which is to finalize a job description and the priorities for the first year for whoever would be coming into that position. And this is to fund the second phase of that process, which is to look for candidates. We have a strong internal candidate, but we want to, it's an important job. We want to make sure that we're looking at all the candidates we can and taking us through the end of the process. And the goal is to have somebody identified by the end of October. So with that, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, the resolution passes. The next is Resolution 14-166, Professional Services Agreement, Whitman Phase 1, Preliminary Assessment, various properties, 37 North Harrison Street, 8 Clearview Ave, 14 Clearview Ave, not to exceed $4,300, and this is for the existing PFARS properties. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Butler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. Next is 14-167, Professional Services Agreement with Hunter Research, Dambrezi Dam, Phase 1A, not to exceed $8,997.60. Are there any? Yep.
Question. Could we get just a little bit of a description about this one and even the next one, I guess, the work that, they're both Hunter Research. Mr. Kaiser, can you speak to those?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Moving ahead with the acquisition of the Dambrezi property, one of the things that we need to do is we need to repair the dam, and there's been lots of back and forth regarding the dam, and DEP has issued a permit from the dam safety section to do the repairs, but we were also required to obtain a permit from DEP for the wetlands. And the process of doing that, Historic Preservation Office, the State Historic Preservation Office, required that this assessment be done prior to giving us authorization to do the dam repair work. So we went out for proposals. We received 2 proposals. The higher one is $9,200, and the one by Hunter is just under $9,000. We've worked with Hunter in the past. They work well with our historic preservation group, and it's recommended that we use them for these services. The second item relates to the extension of the Quaker Road pathway. The first section of the pathway was installed, I guess, about 3 or 4 years ago from the Princeton Friends School to the Historical Society headquarters along Quaker Road. Second phase, which we have a grant for, would go from the Historical Society down to the DNR Canal towpath. This work is anticipated to be done this summer once DPW gets caught up with all the brush and leaf and potholes and so forth. And in order to do that, we actually have to train the DPW workers as to recognizing any artifacts that they may uncover when doing the excavation to construct the path. So these services, also from Hunter Research, in the amount of just over $1,300, is to provide that training for our DPW staff. This was done, I guess, 3 years ago when we did the other section. But now we have a different mix of DPW staff, so it's required that we go ahead and do the training again with the now consolidated DPW staff members.
Can I ask, so does this, the D'Ambrisi Dam, this $9,000 roughly, was that in the original estimate of acquiring and repairing that dam?
No, it was not.
Are there any other questions, comments? Okay.
No. I mean, I'm just going to comment, if I may, what Mr. Kaiser said. The training of the public staff, but not to exceed $1,300 or whatever, is so much cheaper. I know when the old township, we looked at actually having a person on site, and that was a fortune. To have someone on site. Every time they dug and to have someone on site was a fortune. So this is you're talking about a steal. This is just beautiful to be able to train our personnel to be there that's already being paid and to look for things. It's just unbelievable. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Well, given we've talked about both of these, maybe would there be objection to combining them?
I'll move both of them.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Lieberman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those pass unanimously. Next is 14-169, Shared Services Agreement, Senior Network Architectural Engineer, Princeton Public Schools, and Princeton Public Library. And I don't know if Bob McQueen wants to come out for this one. I guess we don't have a chair for you. But this is an agreement that was mentioned during the IT strategic plan, which was to share this position, and this is, I think, an exciting collaboration between the municipality and the schools and the library. And I turn it over to Mr. Peter.
Yeah, we're very excited to bring this before council tonight. We've been working on this a while. Peter Thompson, who's the IT manager for the school district, and Leslie Berger from the library, and I have been meeting. We all have a need. Currently, we outsource our high-end network support for more than what our shared services agreement is going to be, so we are saving a little bit of money there. But what we're gaining, more importantly, is the number of hours that we're going to have a dedicated network person on site. We still have a lot of work to do from consolidation, such as merging domains, looking at the backbone and the infrastructure that we have in place. So with having a person, since our fiber runs through the school and the library and the municipal buildings, this one person is going to have a great understanding of the entire infrastructure that we have, where before our network vendor had to talk to the school's network vendor, to the library's network vendor. So it really complicated things. So we're really excited that we're going to be able to work together through this and bring a person on who's going to be able to move us forward in the right direction. The other big thing is that if the school district has a project they're working on and I had a project that we were working on here, we may not have known that both of us were working on it. This way, that person will be the commonality between all three entities and be able to say, you know, hey, maybe we should do this together so that one entity is not spending a lot of money on something that another one's already spent money on. So it's going to be a win-win situation.
Thank you. Is there a amount we should have on here normally?
Yes.
It was 65,000, wasn't it? Was that the?
It's 59,000 is the amount, is the cost to...
Correct. The total contract is for $130,000, split between the library, the school, and us.
So should the resolution be for the entire amount or for the banker, or just the 59,000?
That's a question for...
I think you just need to mention that the entire contract is $130,000, and then as long as you identify how it's split up, that's okay.
And actually, unless this got changed, number 5, the total combined cost with the association with the appointment of the senior network architect engineer shall not exceed $130,000 during the year.
Okay.
So it is in there, and it's split up that we'll pay 45.4%, the school will pay 45.4%, and the library will pay 9.2%.
Could I, Mayor?
Yeah, Ms. Butler?
I was just going to say, really, thanks to either Kathy or Bob or somebody, but between our personnel meeting last week and tonight, there's a lot of information that's really valuable. I think the job description, when we were talking about it in personnel last week, we were missing a lot of the critical pieces, and I just think it's great that we're looking at ways we can share costs and services with
Yeah,
the
Peter
other
and I
entities
worked
in
the
town.
job description out so that it could
Yeah.
come up before
It's great.
Personnel Committee. So
Thank you.
as I said, we've really, we've talked about this, and it's been a long time coming, and we're glad to see that it's actually happening so that we can move forward in the right direction.
With this employee having essentially 3 bosses, working for 3 organizations, what's your hiring process going to be?
We're going to, the interviews will be split with myself and Peter and Leslie, or a library representative. Leslie may want to assign one of her IT people to that committee, and we're going to interview together. The contract does say that he is a town employee, reports to the CIO of the town, so I'll be doing yearly evaluations with input from the library and the school district on that.
Ms. Connell?
Yeah, and I think I should also say that the schools had a shared service agreement with someone like this before with Hopewell, and so it worked well for them, but that person left, and that's one of the impetus for this, so we're benefiting from that. But so it worked smoothly to share
Correct.
the employees, so I think...
And I think that Peter, Leslie, and I all have a very good working relationship that we'll be able to resolve. I mean, we have it built in there that if one entity has an emergency, obviously we're going to have to dedicate the network person to that emergency to resolve it, and then we'll make up the time throughout that month with the other entities that did.
Yeah, I just also wanted to mention that Peter and someone from the library were at our IT meeting, and we talked about this, and everyone agreed it was a great idea.
Yeah, that's exciting to see, and I think this is the kind of thing where it just makes, once you put it on paper, it makes so much sense to be collaborating on this and to be sharing resources, and it seems like not only are we saving a little bit of money, but we're getting so much more for what we're paying, so it's great. Thank you for putting this together. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. I just had one more.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
Just to confirm, the resolution says it's a fully loaded cost of $130,000. So what's the base salary that we're?
I think the base salary was $85,000 per year,
Right.
and then we used the same multiplier that we used when we did some estimates in the transition and the consolidation. So it's a 42% multiplier. And so that's fully loaded with...
Yeah, okay, that is an average. The only complication that could come in is if the health costs, just depending on the plan.
Right.
So I think
That
there's actually a
is.
little bit of room even with that figure, though.
I think so, and, the resolution is structured that it's a not-to-exceed amount, not only of the $130,000, but of the components in there. So if something happens to that effect, we would have to come back to you to, reevaluate if that's something that we're going to move forward with.
Okay, I think there was a motion and a second already. It was moved by Ms. Krumiller, seconded by... moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Krumiller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution
Thank you
passes
very much.
unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And the final resolution, Resolution 14-170, a supplemental professional services agreement with Miller, Porter, and Muller, PC, for legal services for the Planning Board 2014, not to exceed $34,000. And is there a motion to approve? Are there questions on this one?
Again, just to confirm, this is the total that's expected to cost, so it's the supplemental agreement brings it up to the new total of $34,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
Which is the annual amount, so.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have an ordinance introduction, an ordinance by Princeton relocating a metered parking space from the east side to the west side of Chambers Street and amending the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And I think I see a questioning face. Would you like an explanation of this, or is there a motion to introduce? So moved. All right, it's moved by Ms. Howard and seconded by Mr. Miller, but there seems to be a sidebar here. So.
Well, do you want to clarify exactly which parking spot we're talking about removing and where we're moving it to?
Sergeant Thomas Murray, Princeton Police Department Traffic Safety Officer. Just to give you a quick background, this has been something that we've been working on for a little over a year. This was one of the initial items that was placed upon the newly consolidated the Traffic and Transportation Committee's agenda, and it had to do with pedestrian safety at the intersection of Chambers Street and Hallfish Street. When we evaluated what the problems were, which came in mainly through one email, and it has grown since that time, we went to go look at ways that we could improve the safety of pedestrian crossings in that intersection. We've been chipping away at it a little bit at a time. Since that time, we've made improvements to the marked international style crosswalk. We've outlined the older traditional faux brick one with thermoplastic on either side. We also made a decision to install the in-street pedestrian crossing signs in the area. But we were still having some issues, and if anybody, and I'm sure everybody here has, if you look at Chambers Street in the north-south direction, if you turn off on Nassau Street, you'll be heading north on Chambers Street. As you come down Chambers Street, which is a posted 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, the roadway configuration is straight, and then when you get just north of the entrance and exit to the parking garage, there's a curvature in the roadway, which curves to the right. Now, what that does, if you can picture this, is if I'm a motorist here and that last stall is here, I can see as far as the last stall or a vehicle parked within that last stall. I cannot see anything beyond that. And it just so happens that the crosswalk is located 88 feet from that portion, the end portion of that stall, to the crosswalk. So for anybody traveling north on Chambers Street, the only section that you can see of that crosswalk is the western portion. You can't see anything from the middle portion east, meaning towards Hallfish Street. So we looked at it and said, well, what can we do here to improve the sight distance for a motorist to be able to recognize the fact that there is a pedestrian either entering into or within the crosswalk? And if you go look at it, the obvious solution was, well, we can pick up 19 feet, which doesn't sound like much, but when I give you some figures in a minute, you'll see how important it is. We can pick up 19 feet by relocating that specific parking stall, which we call CH9. That's the meter number for that particular stall. So I initially wanted to move 2 parking stalls. There's kind of a compromise situation, and we looked at the totality of the circumstances. We looked at we settled back on, okay, well, let's just start with 1, and where can we do that so we don't lose the revenue that particular metered stall may bring in. The obvious solution, once again, if you look at the area, was to relocate it to the west side of Chambers Street to an area north of Hallfish, which actually is exactly 200 feet north And in terms of walking distance, besides the 200 feet, I walked it today myself. It took me 45 seconds. So there's really not a great inconvenience to, as far as a relocation of that person who would be utilizing the stall is concerned, but there would be a great safety enhancement for any pedestrians. So just to sort of hit this home, I'm going to ask you to write down two numbers for me if you can. And I don't want to bother you with all the math and everything, but this is based upon years of traffic studies and engineering and reconstruction. The average reaction time for a person when they're traveling, for a young driver that's got all his facilities or faculties about him and is very attentive, is 1.6 seconds. Studies have shown that the senior population and people that are doing what we all know they do, texting or distracting, can add a full second to that 2.6 seconds reaction time. The reason I'm giving you this is 1.6 seconds doesn't sound like that much amount of time, but when you factor in the speed limit, for a 25 mile per hour speed limit at 1.6 seconds, it comes out to a car is traveling 37.5 feet per second. Okay, so in terms of being able to recognize somebody, a car is traveling 37.5 seconds at 25 miles an hour in that amount of time. Now, when you go to compute what's called the total braking or total stopping distance, it involves the speed limit plus the reaction time plus what they call the coefficient of friction for the roadway. I factored that in at 0.07%. Once again, that's conservative. That's based upon optimum conditions, meaning the roadway surface is dry. There's no oil or anything on the roadway. The car is in great shape. It's got a set of premium tires on it. So you can see when all of these factors aren't met, it adds time and it adds distance. Now, for when you do all these computations at 25 miles per hour, if in fact the car is doing 25 miles an hour, you need 87 feet of total stopping distance. The distance, like I told you earlier, was 88 feet. That leaves us 1 foot of buffer zone, okay? If it rains or any of those, the coefficient of friction changes or anything like that, or a person doesn't have that 1.6 seconds of reaction time, it can easily go to 100 or to 120 feet, which obviously leaves us about 15 to 20 feet short. Now, if you remove that 19 feet from the parking stall and you add it, we're in that safe window. So that's basically in a nutshell why I want to do it. Those are the numbers that support doing it. I commend the council for taking a proactive stance earlier tonight as far as the floodplain is concerned. And I just like to sort of use this as a segue or whatever, but I don't usually get the opportunity to do this kind of work until something bad happens. And one of the downsides to my job is that when we have a fatality or a serious pedestrian accident, I'm the one that's tasked with investigating it, and this is part of what we do. And the point I'm trying to make is that you usually don't become aware of these things, that there may not be enough ample stopping distance until something bad does happen. And my goal here tonight, and I think the goal of the Traffic and Transportation Committee and everybody on it, is to try to increase pedestrian safety in that area. So for a 200-foot inconvenience, 45-second walk, back towards the Hallfish Street garage, we're going to greatly enhance the pedestrian safety at this intersection. And I would hope that everybody agrees with my assessment and recommendation.
Thank you. Ms. Grunwald?
I just have a question. So you don't think that the new parking spot is going to affect people coming out? Am I reading this map correctly, that that's right across from the garage? And so people coming out and making a left, I mean...
A concern, if I think I know where you're going.
And I'm kind of wondering, why wasn't there a parking spot there before, if that's such a good place for a parking spot?
It was brought to my attention, and I haven't been able to confirm it, but it was brought to my attention that that was the result of a past incident which happened on Bank Street, as far as a car trying to exit Bank Street. I computed the numbers for that as well, and based upon the 25 mile per hour speed limit, the addition of that stall on the north side or the northwest side of Chambers would not impede any sight distance to the point where we would have a concern with that. If we were to add 2 or 3 more stalls, then yes. But the addition of 1 additional stall there, it's not going to affect the sight distance. And just one other point, and Mayor Lempert herself sent me this months ago. She had actually been sent an email from a resident that also had concerns about exiting the Chambers Street garage because of that very stall that we're talking about moving, saying that if you were to come out of the Chambers Street garage and attempt to make a left on the Chambers to head towards Nassau Street, that because of the curvature of the roadway and the fact that the car was there, it impeded the sight distance for cars coming in the southern direction up Chambers Street. So there's a number of different reasons for it, but the main reason is that when that car is parked in that spot, you cannot see half of the crosswalk.
And then the last question is, are the meters the same price, the per hour price that we're switching out?
I think they are.
I believe they are.
I think the meters are all, yeah.
I don't believe there would be any discrepancies in the rate or the limits or anything like that.
Ms. Butler?
I'm going to support Sergeant Murray and I have had a little bit of back and forth on this. These meters, these spots are not created equal. And if you park in town a lot, you'll know that you would get to this spot if you are circling the spot that's being removed, you would have access to. You would only have access. If you're in town and you're looking for a spot, the spot that we are creating, you would have to get to in a completely different way. So I don't think it's a spot that's going to create equal revenue, and I don't think that it's not even. These aren't interchangeable spots, even though they may not have been very far apart by foot. When you think about the direction your car has to be going and where you might be coming from, and if you're circling in town, they're not comparable, really.
Understood.
And the other thing is, there have not been, I know people feel uneasy, but it does cause them to slow down a little bit, and that's always, some parked cars do slow traffic because visually they create some
They make it
concern.
narrower.
Right, they make it narrower, and so it does create. And so you've been out and looking at whether people are speeding, and they're not.
Yeah, well,
That's been a concern, and residents have said that people are speeding, but you've looked at that, and they're not speeding. Is that your finding?
I can't account for all motorists.
Well-
It depends on what we would, if you look at the totality of everything, do we have a speeding problem on Chambers Street compared to other areas, which obviously there are other areas which there are a lot greater number of speeding violations. To get back to that, we referred to what we call friction, creating friction by the presence of parked vehicles. Keep in mind that we still are leaving 2 vehicles there out of those 3 spots. Less than 2 weeks ago, I also worked with the line stripers. That was part of the other solution to increasing safety there. We went out and we redid the double yellow line. And actually, the double yellow line right in that area of the first stall, the CH9 stall, was obliterated. It wasn't even there. And the reason is because the cars cross over into the oncoming lane because the rear end of that car sticks out. Even though it's within the marked portion of the stall, especially you have a sport utility vehicle, something that's higher or wider in nature, the cars do tend to bow out. And another thing that we haven't, and I know that Councilwoman Butler's aware of this, our DPW has been out there almost on a daily basis replacing the in-street pedestrian signs. And I really believe that the fact that now that we take that vehicle away and a person can be aware that it's there and then be given advance notice to slow down, immediately recognize it as a crosswalk and make the appropriate adjustments. Whereas before, if you weren't familiar with the area, you wouldn't realize that there was a crosswalk there and it was that narrow until you got to that CH9 stall. And now all of a sudden it's panic time. Do I brake? Do I swerve into oncoming traffic? I didn't see that pedestrian. And it's even more complicated because there is an incline involved. So if you do have a sport utility type vehicle, you can't even see the person's head, like a 6-foot person or pedestrian. If they're crossing in a westerly direction, you cannot see them until they're in the middle of the crosswalk.
If you want to save the stanchion, you're going to have to remove the other spot on that same side of the road that's as you're at the corner of Hallfish and you're making the right-hand turn, you're going to have to remove that spot as well.
Actually, right now, Dan Van Matter and I are experimenting with different locations, and believe it or not, we put one up, I believe it was Wednesday of last week, and I was kind of anxious to see whether it would last, and it has lasted since last Wednesday.
You changed the location of the stanchion.
Yes. And when I was out there with the line stripers, I had the opportunity to really see what motorists were doing and how they were reacting, and visualize and observe some of the turning movements, and we're sort of nailing it down. I'm not saying that it's perfect right now. We may have to make an adjustment here or there, but we're trying to mirror the distances on either side of the crosswalk.
Can I move this ordinance?
I believe it's already been.
Could I say one thing?
Moved and
want
seconded, but yeah, Ms.
I
Butler.
do want to compliment Sergeant Murray for really using a multi-pronged approach to trying to make that area as safe as possible. We have done a lot, both looking at the speeding and the stanchions and the crosswalks and highlighting them, and now removing parking spots. So hopefully this will continue to help.
Only one. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's already been moved and seconded. Has it? No, it hasn't. All right. All right, it's been moved by Mr. Liverman.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Miller. And Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
And Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And the
Thank
public...
you once again, everyone.
Thank you. The public hearing for this ordinance will be on June 23rd, 2014. All right. Now we have a long set of ordinance public hearings from the ordinance harmonization work we've been doing, and for all of these, I need to open and close the public hearing. So we expect Sue Nemeth to make a comment for each one of these. All right. The first one is an ordinance by Princeton concerning general provisions and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'd like to open the public hearing on this ordinance. And seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And are there any comments from council, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll move the ordinance.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Liverman. Ms. Butler? No. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the ordinance is passed. The next one is an ordinance by Princeton concerning administration and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And are there any questions, or is there a motion from council?
So
Second.
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Crummiller. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and that ordinance passed. Next one is an ordinance by Princeton concerning parades and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. I'm going to open the public hearing on this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and see if there are any questions or if there's a motion from council.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Crummiller, seconded by Mr. Miller. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ordinance passed. And I just want to stop for a second. Anybody watching on television that's alarmed by the speed by which we're going through this? This, I think, is actually the third or fourth meeting we've had on these, and most of them are fairly routine, although it's taken a lot of work, both from Lisa Maddox, our attorney, and from the Code Review Committee, Jenny Crummiller, Bernie Miller, and Joe Butler. But we've all had discussions on this, so now we're doing the final part. Okay. Ordinance by Princeton concerning pay-to-play regulations and campaign contributions and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And is there a motion? Moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Butler. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ordinance passes. The next is an ordinance by Princeton concerning municipal court and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion or?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that ordinance passed. The next is an ordinance by Princeton concerning peddling and soliciting and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Oh, and if there's a
hate to break our record here,
from Ms.
but
Howard.
I think Jenny and I both have questions. Lisa, this is for you. I had heard a complaint from a neighbor who said they had somebody coming by their house late. It was almost 9 o'clock, and so I want to make sure I understand why we've set the parameters the way we have. If somebody is going around and it's non-commercial speech, so it's fundraising for a cause, we can't limit that, right? That's not subject to this registration requirement. That's the way I read it, that they can't, the license requirements of this article shall not apply to the following.
Right, that's only the licensing requirements, but the general regulatory provisions would apply.
So they shouldn't be able to come by after 8 p.m.?
Let me just double check that is the way we have it. Under, let's see, it's 1410. Those are the general regulations, and that's where we have the time. No one can peddle, solicit, offer to sell, or solicit, or engage in similar conduct except between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Yes, because also if you go to the section that exempts those organizations, the nonprofits, which is, hold on, 14.3. C, it says nothing in this section shall be construed as exempting the persons or organizations listed in this section, which would be under B, from compliance with provisions of this article that do not deal with or relate to licenses. So there are two sections essentially. There's the licensing requirement, and then there are the regulations that apply to all organizations and individuals.
So there's no reason that somebody should have been knocking on her door after 8 p.m.?
Absolutely.
And so what do we recommend? I mean, it's just interesting, so now I'll clarify, I mean, is that they should,
I guess,
call the police department?
the police department, because they wouldn't be registered with, I would
Yeah.
say the clerk's office, but the clerk's office wouldn't have the information, so it would be the police department.
And if they do get information, I mean, maybe it's helpful if they get the information of who it was, and they let the clerk know the next day. Would we take action, Kathy, on somebody who was violating this?
They would still have to go through, because if it's a nonprofit, they're not getting a license at the clerk's
Right,
office.
so what's our hook on them?
It's going to end up being a summons or a ticket, through the police
Absolutely,
department.
yes, and it would be a
Oh, you
regular.
can still have to go through the police, you're saying?
Right,
to
and
get
they would,
something, yeah.
they could be issued a summons and complaint and have to go before the municipal court, and the potential fines are hefty, so.
That's assuming that we could find them if there's no information that's transpired, it's kind of hard, I think, except if you kind of catch them in the act, so.
But it's, I mean, I remember
timely call
Jenny
would-
talking about this last time, that you guys in crafting this tried to do the most you could to be as protective as you could of citizens, and that there's only so far we can go given free speech rights, and so this is a real balancing. And so as I remember, as you described it last time, Jenny, it was you guys have done as much as you can, and what we can do is inform citizens then that of what those rules are and then what they can do after. So thank you for clarifying, because I thought maybe it was a nonprofit and that they were exempt. So that helps.
Absolutely.
And it might be worth us doing outreach, not just to our residents, but to the typical nonprofits, too, that come around. And 8 p.m. does seem like a really reasonable time, because It's usually before it gets dark, and it's scary when your doorbell rings at 8:45 and you don't know who it is.
Yeah, you could definitely see
Right.
how it'd be scary, 8:45, somebody's at your door, so, thank you.
Ms. Butler?
Well, I was just going to say, we did really spend quite a bit of time talking about what the appropriate hours ought to be, and we did try to factor in, what time the sun sets in summer, and you want to allow people some window of time to solicit from people between the time they might get home from work, but also we felt 8 o'clock was a pretty reasonable time, given the high number of seniors, people living alone.
Absolutely. I think 8 o'clock across the board is considered very reasonable from a privacy standpoint and a free speech standpoint, because that's always what you have to balance. So, and that's relatively common for other towns to have a time when it's when people are home, and you don't want to exclude that period of time when residents are actually home, because that's when a lot of the nonprofits go out, and you don't want to curb the ability to actually find someone home at that time.
Lisa, we did have considerable discussion about who might be eligible for permits, but the law does exempt certain classes of people from the requirement for permits, and it might be a good idea if you kind of enumerated them.
Yes, and they're actually in section, I think it was section 14.3. Basically, these, you have to be really careful, and the most important thing is to ensure that the nonprofits are essentially exempt from the licensing requirement, and commercial entities and commercial individuals are not exempt. So we had gone through many different cases and to ensure that we had the right categories of exempt organizations. So we have nonprofit organizations, that under B1, and we have a definition for nonprofits, which is extremely broad, and they're considered nonprofit under federal law or state law. Also, children of school age that are representing school clubs and organizations like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and the like. You have other individuals distributing non-commercial or not-for-profit handbills, pamphlets, leaflets, circulars, advertisements, or printed material, which is extremely broad, so they don't even necessarily have to be representing an organization. Persons campaigning for elected office are exempt from the license. Very general category is any individual engaging in advocacy of really any non-commercial or non-profit purpose, which the Supreme Court has come down and said that you really have to protect that very broad group. And it's also spontaneous speech. Like if a neighbor wants to go to his or her neighbors, to your home and has something to say about the school board election or whatever it may be, they should not have to get a license before they do that. That's the kind of speech that the First Amendment protects. People honorably discharged from the military of the United States. There's a state law regarding those individuals and how they can more easily go door to door. This also included in that category would be firemen who possess identification from the county. And also another somewhat broad category is sometimes you have your census takers and other individuals who are sanctioned by the federal government or the state government for purposes of going door to door. They're exempt because there's a state law already or a federal law already regulating those individuals. So it's a relatively broad group of people who are exempt, and therefore you're only left with purely commercial solicitors, which is not a very big group, but that's just the way that the Supreme Court handles these types of ordinances, and that's the most we can do and keep within confines of the law.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simon?
Just with respect to categories 5 and 6 from the list you just read, the honorable discharge from the military and exempt firemen, those two specifically don't specify what they're doing, just who they are. So are they covered even for commercial activity, or is the intent to cover them with respect to specific activities maybe that are in state statute that are not enumerated here?
They are actually, it's actually those categories of individuals, and it doesn't necessarily have to specify what they're doing. And it's just because there's state law that provides that they're exempt from specific, I mean, it's just.
So they can pedal?
Yeah, they can pedal if they have this, basically it's a county ID.
Without requiring a local license is what the state.
Correct.
Ms. Connolly?
I think last time we talked about, I think that it would be nice, this isn't in the ordinance, but that if we could get a notice when we get license requests, and that maybe we can, maybe the clerk could let us know when you give out licenses. How often do you